All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Weird Bible. It's been forever, but I'm glad to be back. I got Thornbury here right next to me, and Isaiah joining us from the Wendigoon compound.
Hi.
Yeah,
Hi from the Wendigoon compound.
as you can see, he is trim. He is very 70s Swayze. It's looking good.
Hey, when I throw on the Hawaiian and the aviators, it's the whole look now.
Oh, I'm
the
sure.
Whole aesthetic, yeah.
But yeah, today we're talking about demons, and I wanted to do this partially because it's Halloween season. There's the whole conception that Halloween is a pagan holiday and that it's demon worship and all of that. But I also just wanted to go into what demons are, where that all comes from, because the more I've gotten into the deeper side of theology, the more I've realized how utterly misconstrued everything is. What people think about demons, what pop culture thinks demons are, how Hollywood presents it, just very divorced from the actual biblical concept. And of course, it's, with how often you don't get a lot of mentions of exorcisms, for example, in the Old Testament. In fact, I don't think you get any. Do we get any exorcisms in the Old Testament?
There's mentions of like demons and stuff like that. I don't think there's any explicit mentions of an exorcism, though. Not that I know of.
So I can't think of one. But in the New Testament, this is like a big thing. Jesus can exorcise demons. That's huge. And if you look at some of the Old Testament stuff about how to deal with demons, there's one in I think it's Leviticus where it says that if somebody is possessed by an evil spirit, they should be stoned to death because there's no other option. Like that person, you can't exorcise demons. That doesn't work. You have to kill the person. Jesus comes along and suddenly we can exorcise demons. So I wanted to start kind of by asking you guys, like growing up, in America with Hollywood everywhere, what was your impression of what demons are? I guess, Isaiah, start with you.
My impression of demons growing up was very, I guess, stereotypical, like, Southern Gothic depiction of, like, oh, they're these evil, henchmen of the devil who run around trying to perform an evil acts in the earth. So, sure, possession, but what was more emphasized was like they tempt you, right? Like demons were the tempters. They put like troubles in your path for you to follow. They put dangers in your way, stuff like that. They're out to get you effectively. So the stereotypical like devil's henchman. I was never really taught I was taught that the devil's evil and stuff. I was never really taught the like pitchfork and horns type. It was more so like fallen angel.
Right.
So it was like the demons are other fallen angels that are devilish and out to sow discord in the world. So that was kind of my depiction I had growing up.
Yeah. What about you?
For me, it was a lot more of the like monstrous type. A lot more kind of, I don't want to say supernatural, but more the creature-esque, where it was focused on beyond just temptress or tempter. Somebody who wants to draw you into something negative. It's more somebody who's imposing negativity into your life. Somebody who's actively causing you harm, not causing you to cause yourself harm, in a sense. So very much more like the scary monster in your closet rather than somebody who influences you to do bad.
Right. So it sounds like yours is a little bit more the secular.
Yeah, 100%.
Secular form of it.
Yeah.
So for me, growing up, it was I don't remember hearing a ton about demons from the church community and from my parents and all that. You heard the temptations of Satan and that there are demons and that exorcisms happen and possessions and all that, but it was none of the like there wasn't a ton of lore to it, so to speak. There wasn't anything about how they function necessarily, where they came from. I only started to encounter that when I was a teenager and I started getting more into pop culture. So I was taught about demons mostly by Hollywood. And for me, that was a lot of things like the Conjuring movies, which definitely try to stick a little bit more to the biblical side of things. Supernatural was probably the one where I saw it the most. Supernatural demons are, I believe it's mostly twisted human souls and then a smattering of fallen angels.
Yep.
Like for the show's been out for a while, guys. Crowley, the king of hell, he's a twisted human soul. Prior to him, the king of hell is Lucifer, who is played by Mark Pellegrino, who's actually an awesome guy. But so for me, pardon me, still sick. I learned that demons were, these really intense soldiers of Satan who were all about corrupting man and bringing about the apocalypse. As I got further into this, and as I got a minor in religious studies, I started to question that. And I think one of the big things was, I had this concept growing, like looking at the theology side and talking to other religious people, that demons were fallen angels, specifically. That's all a demon is. It's one of the third of the angels that Satan sweeps from the heavens at the beginning of Revelation. So I'm curious about this one for you, Isaiah. How do you interpret the Revelation 12, I guess, where Satan sweeps a third of the stars from the sky and then comes down, and there's the woman and the dragon? Is that something that's going to happen in the future, or is that at the birth of Christ?
I mean, Revelations is a hard one in that I wouldn't give. I'm very careful about saying, yes, this is what Revelations means or doesn't mean. It's obviously very poetic throughout most of its descriptions and stuff like that, right? So I'm careful about being like, yes, this is what it means. What I think it might means is talking about where it says a third of the stars. It also talks about in the Bible, I forget where, but about a third of the angels falling with Lucifer.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, that seems a little bit too coincidental, in my opinion. I think here when it says his tail swept down a third of the stars, that's talking about the demons coming over to the side of Lucifer, effectively. Because what the book of Revelation is John's vision of the end time. So I think what's happening there is God is giving John a vision of history, right? Of the veils being lifted. He's being shown existence. So I think there, the third of the stars coming down is in reference to the demons coming with him and being created. The other angels falling with Lucifer, effectively.
Gotcha. So
did we want to bring up why we brought that up?
Yeah. So Aiden was looking into some stuff. He was watching an interview with a Catholic priest. And that priest said that demons, that's the origin of demons, basically, is Satan's rebellion at the birth of Christ.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with that, at least in the sense of it being all evil spirits come from that event. And this is going to get into something I was really excited to bring up, because I wasn't sure how much I was going to be able to talk about it, but I've been reading a lot of Heiser. Dr. Michael Heiser. He has a fantastic series, beginning with a book called The Unseen Realm, and then there's Angels and Demons, and Reversing Herman. And the whole point of this is reading the Bible in the context of the ancient Israelite worldview. Because the ancient Israelites absolutely believed in demons and in angels that came down to the earth to talk to people. They saw a lot of direct divine intervention in the world. And most interestingly, in my opinion, you see a lot of parallels with Ugarit, with Canaan, with Babylon, where you have terminology, you have stories, things that all seem to be talking about the same thing from different points of view. And a lot of people historically and scholars in the community have said, oh, well, Judaism is the youngest of these religions. Therefore, it was the Jews rewriting these stories so that their God was the highest and he was the good guy. Heiser takes a very different approach to it, which is that these are all the same pantheon. And the Jewish one is from the same period of time. That all of these are describing the same religious concepts, but it depends who you're worshiping. So it wasn't that the Jews stole it. It wasn't that this was something that they came up with while they were in Egypt, or that when they went to Babylon, they tried to fit their theology into, or fit the Babylonian mythology into their theology. It was that they had these stories from the beginning, and their version of it has Yahweh being the chief god. The other versions of it have Yahweh being either a minor deity or not existing at all. And where it gets really interesting is how it all ties back to Babel. We did a video on Babel. We did an episode. And what you see in that incident is a very interesting episode. You have the whole issue of human beings build this tower up to the sky, and they're trying to become like the gods. Why are they doing this? Because they think they can, and because they have demons guiding them. What are demons? I'm going to get to that in a second, because it's important. But this is important to understanding why the theology seems so connected between these different groups. When the Tower of Babel is destroyed, and when the languages are split up to all the people, and the humans are dispersed to cover the whole earth, we get a very specific episode here. I'm going to read from Psalm 82 in the King James Version, because the one I have on me. But Isaiah, I'm sure you've read this one before. Psalm 82:6. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. Heard that one?
Yes. Yeah.
Confusing, right? If Christianity is a monotheistic religion.
Correct. I mean, it's also Psalm, so it's, like poetry, but yeah.
So this verse gets a lot of mileage, but I wanted to do one other thing. After reading that, I want to go back to something else because it makes sense in context, but it doesn't make a ton of sense the way it's written, disparately throughout the Bible. But if we go back to, so that is the reason I brought that up is that the Hebrew there is not, it's not really in question. The terminology is sons of God, B'nai Elohim. Elohim is often translated as gods. What it means is spirits. It is a term that is typically applied to godly spirit, but it means spirits. B'nai Elohim is a term that applies to sons of God. There's a lot of passages in the Bible where that is seen as, the godly people, the godly line. But if you go back to Deuteronomy 32:8 specifically, I'm going to pull this one up. Allow me to flip some pages. So, when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. So Heiser posits that, and I agree with him, that this is the incorrect translation. This is a Septuagint translation. The Dead Sea Scrolls read not children of Israel, but sons of God. And what Heiser's arguing is that what this episode is describing, because this is right after Babel, is that after the Tower of Babel, after everybody was dispersed, after the languages were confounded, the nations, the number of them and their boundaries were set according to the number of the sons of God. Those being the highest tier of angel, the B'nai Elohim. And that the reason that you have differences between the religions of Babylon and Ugarit and Canaan and Egypt and Israel, all of these different parts of the world, is that they have a different son of God. So those sons of God in some cases would be seen as, taking over. Like maybe some of them are like, no, I'm the real God, worship me. Or it might be that they were only allowed to worship the God of their nation. The Jews were told to worship Yahweh and nobody else because they were Yahweh's portion. They don't need to pray to anybody else because they have the highest God. They don't need, it's unnecessary, and to pray to anybody else is an insult. Don't do it. Also, they might lead you astray. So I know I'm probably not being as direct as I would want to be here because I'm trying to put all my thoughts together. But the idea, what's being posited here, I'm going to, change my books a little bit, is that there are multiple divine rebellions in the Bible. You have the first one in Genesis, in the garden. You have the second one is also in Genesis with the Watchers and the sons of God coming down and procreating with the daughters of men. And then that the third one happens, I believe, at the birth of Christ, which is the Satan sweeping a third of the stars from the sky. So each of these rebellions involves evil spirits. Those evil spirits, however, are in the New Testament pretty much blanket referred to as demons. So there's a lot of, I think the reason that you get a lot of the confusion with the term, with demons is the terminology. Because in the Greek text, it's any evil spirit is described as a demon, specifically the word daimon. In the Old Testament, you have a lot of different terminology. You have a lot of different classifications. You have the fallen angels. You have the angels that are in opposition. You have Shadim. You have the princes. All of these different groups. Michael, for example, is referred to as the chief prince in Daniel 10. So, or a chief prince in Daniel 10. And I think Gabriel is also up there. So demon is a broad term. in English. What we perceive as demons in English is a much more specific thing. And in the Bible, as far as Heiser's concerned, it's the Nephilim.
So are you going off of that? So for like demons mentioned in the Old Testament, are you saying that that would be like the Nephilim or like some other spirit or something like
It's the
that other than
spirits.
just angels?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I'm curious about your thoughts on that. And I'm happy to talk about it a little, discuss it.
Really quick, Isaiah, I'm going to give you a second to collect your thoughts because I do want to make a quick announcement.
Oh, right. I forgot to do that.
It's all good. So, due to time constraints this evening, everybody, we're going to ask that you get all of your super chats in by 8:30 at the latest, if possible. And we're going to prioritize the relevant ones first. And then if we have some time, we'll go back through in some of the other ones, primarily because, we're a little bit behind today, which, it happens. But also, we've got a hard out today at 10 because it is my girlfriend's birthday. And we are going to go celebrate that across the street.
Happy birthday.
So, thank you. But yeah, just want to make sure we don't want to miss any super chats, but we want to make sure we give you a little bit of time to get those in. Appreciate you guys being cooperative with that. But anyway, take it away.
Here, let me, maybe just to make this a little bit easier on you, Isaiah, let me grab a specific passage. But now, where'd it go? Where'd the passage go? This
Do you
is
have any
my fault.
initial thoughts?
Just so I'm more so a believer that like when the stuff about the third of the stars falling and a third of the angels, I think that would be at the original fall, right? Because it talks about if I could find that exact verse where it talks about
When you say original fall, what are you referring to?
when Lucifer fell from heaven.
Okay.
Because it speaks of like Lucifer fell and the angels with him. So it implies, at least to me, that it was at the same time. So in that case, that would according to my interpretation, that would explain where the demons show up throughout, because they're pretty early on in the New Testament. Like they're outright mentioned in Deuteronomy. Like the KJV Bible never says demons, it says devils, which same thing, whatever.
Old terminology.
Alternate terminology. It talks about devils and stuff like that. By the time that the disciples come along, devils is already in their vernacular, like they're aware of it. They speak to Jesus about like there's a devil in them or whatnot. And we know that Jesus casts them out. And like even when Jesus shows up, right, there's people like the maniac of Gadara who it says has spent decades being possessed by several spirits. So I know there's some debate around like difference between like unclean spirits and devils. And so I'm like, honestly, to me, I've always just kind of assumed they're one and the same, like different words for the same beast. But I'm also willing to hear out other sides of that unclean spirits could be something else, which is because there are points in the Bible where it talks about a spirit entering someone. Like, for example, because somehow we always end up talking about David and Saul on this podcast. Saul, when it talks about him being filled with a spirit or spirit coming over him, a lot of people interpret that as just like a mental illness or like depression or anger, like a spirit of rage comes upon him, or others see it as a demon. And I don't really see it. It doesn't fully make sense to me in either way. It's almost somewhere in the middle, which is why I can kind of hear out people who talk about spirits, stuff like that throughout the Bible. So in that sense, I could change up. But in my interpretation, I'm pretty positive that demons fell with Lucifer and then are depicted throughout the Bible as such by name as other fallen angels, effectively. I think that a lot of these demons became gods of other groups of people, which is outright said in Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
I think it's
That's Deuteronomy 32 basically just says it.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I got pulled up. You're on the same page I am. Yeah, where it says that a lot of these gods that other nations have, like Baal and Dagon and stuff like that, that they sacrifice and worship to, are just demons or devils that have made themselves gods over other people. So in that sense, yes, those spirits and demons, absolutely the same thing. But other cases where the Bible refers to as spirits, I'd be interested to hear different interpretations, because honestly I'm not positive about that one.
So I'm actually very close to where you are, I think, just in the reverse, in that I'm interpreting demon as referring to a lower classification of spirit, whereas I would see the sons of God in Deuteronomy 32 who get the inheritance of the nations as being, you know, assigned those by God himself, and then over time some of them are corrupted and try and, you know, ascend or be independent, whatever. And then you have, of course, the chief adversary, who we refer to as Satan, who you know, he causes the fall of man, and then he's the one who's trying to make himself higher than God. There are actually a lot of parallels to that storyline within the Babylonian and Ugaritic texts, where you start to see, like, there is the chief god, El, in these pantheons, who is challenged by another god for supremacy. Or there is the co-regency story, where you have the various Elohim, the various gods, quote unquote, battling it out to be the right-hand man. And then for demons, I'm going to give you from Heiser here. And I'm gonna paraphrase a little bit, but he says that the origin of demons was tied to the second supernatural rebellion in Genesis 6:1 through 4. Demons were the disembodied spirits of dead Nephilim in Second Temple thought, a conclusion drawn from the Mesopotamian backstory to Genesis 6:1, and the presence of Rephaim spirits in underworld scenes in the Old Testament. These data points were then joined by another idea from the Old Testament that the realm of the dead was the domicile of the original rebel, Satan. These scriptural loose ends were tied together in the Second Temple Jewish text to posit a hierarchical relationship between Satan and the demons. So that's basically him wrapping up what has been said in the book so far. But
okay, so the Genesis 6:1 through 4 is the part about the sons of God mingling with the daughters of man, right? Okay, so he's saying that the demons, whatever, the fallen angels, didn't convert to demons with Lucifer. Instead, they converted in the early days of humanity pre-flood, when they like mingled, whatever you want to call it, with daughters of men.
Yeah, he makes an argument in here, and I'm trying to remember which chapter it's in, because I would like to.
Well, I mean, I could see that it's basically the same. All of it's pre-flood, right? So that would all if it was either with Lucifer or pre-flood with, you know, humanity post Adam and Eve, that both results in fallen angels, aka demons, existing throughout the Old Testament and into the future. Yeah. I mean, I could see that. Yeah, I would.
Yeah, because you've got the Watchers for one. I mean, and this is extra biblical text, but it's written during a time period when you're still Second Temple Judaism. These are people writing things that might not be considered scripture, but it gives you an idea of what they believed about things.
They saw something.
Yeah.
They clearly believed in it. Yeah.
I feel like Enoch probably isn't the most accurate thing in the world in some cases, because like I don't think the giants were 10,000 feet tall. I think we would have found one by now. Also, like how
have
was
you checked
that
the ocean?
That's not even that's not even like big. That's their foot is going to cover several square miles.
Yeah, that's...
How are they going to eat? It just doesn't make sense. So there's definitely some things in Enoch where you're like, okay, that is absolutely hyperbole, but it's not really marked as such. But what I was going to go into, if I can find it, was, the difference is in here, the idea is that the Nephilim are the offspring of the sons of God and the human women. And that God's punishment with this, if I could find, because there was a line that just goes so hard. Where was it? It's driving me insane that I can't find it.
It's a shame, because you did just read it.
I did just read it. I'm trying to find it again.
A verse about punishment?
What's that?
A verse about punishment, is that what you said?
Yeah.
It was in the Heiser book, but I will say this is kind of relevant to a super chat that we already got.
Sure.
Where somebody was asking, let me find it again really quickly. No, it's a little higher up. Sorry, hang on. Here we go. From Wander for $20, saying, I've recently been seeing a lot of people claiming Yahweh is a shoot-off of old Canaanite gods / storm gods. Was wondering if you guys thought about doing an episode clearing up some of these historical and theological falsehoods.
To an extent, that's what I'm trying to get into here.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you are a Mesopotamian priest and you're a follower of Marduk, for example, I believe he's the high god in Babylonian mythology. Obviously, if there's another rival religion with another rival sect, you're going to say that they're just a spin-off of you.
Mhm.
We see this in modern religions all the time. Shias and Sunnis, Catholics and Protestants and Orthodox. You have conservative Jews and you have liberal Jews. I mean, there are spin-offs of every single religion out there that each look at each other and go, no, mine's the real one. Yours is just some other silly thing. I think when it comes to the issue with Yahweh being a supposed spin-off, we don't have attestation of the term Yahweh going back prior to, I think, like 800 BC. Why are you laughing?
That's just a funny summary of the Crusades. Mine's the real one. Yours is some other silly thing.
Sounds like a Monty Python skit about the
This is a
Crusades.
silly place.
And then war for several hundred years.
Yeah. But so what I like about that one is all of this is based upon the fact that we might have an inscription of the name Yahweh in reference to a storm deity from a Canaanite like stele in the 800s. Judaism, in its tradition, dates back in its Mosaic form to 1200. We don't have. I mean, we have reason to believe they were in Egypt because they are mentioned on the Merneptah stele,
Mhm.
which coincides with the dating of when the Exodus would be, and it talks about how the Israelites are gone. Like, it describes them basically as nomads, and then it says they're gone, they're done, they're out. That's probably them leaving, because we know that ancient monarchs all over the place would constantly do this thing where they knew nobody was going to argue with them, so they would just say whatever. They'd be like, I did this thing. And then if there was nobody left to argue, who's to say? They wiped out the Israelites as far as they knew because the Israelites were gone into the wilderness. Israelites show up 40 years later in Canaan and then start to build things again. They start to regroup. So, how is it that you would make the argument, given the stories we have, that Yahweh is definitively a storm deity from Canaan if he doesn't show up until 400 years after the Israelites leave Egypt and go back to Canaan? There's no references to Yahweh prior to 1600 BC when the Israelites would be entering Egypt. There are no references to Yahweh in Mesopotamian mythology prior to, I think, like the 600s. Where did Yahweh come from if he's suddenly showing up after the Israelites start worshiping?
There's only three things I can think of.
Which are?
Either A, he didn't, and it's a reversal.
Mhm.
B, they somehow didn't know about him until then. Or C, there was a different name.
Probably didn't know about him. Because he starts referring to himself as Yahweh, I believe, for the first time to Moses, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the first time it's said that way. I mean, before then, it's just generally God.
Yeah. God or Elyon, I believe, is
Yeah.
in there somewhere. You know, the Most High, things like that. So he starts using the term Yahweh with Moses. The
Mhm.
God exists a lot longer before that, and if you look at where he comes from, there's all these ideas that, you know, oh yeah, they adopted everything when they got to Babylon. I think there's far too many things about the Israelite belief system that are unique to the Israelites for them to have just gotten it all from Babylon. Most people say this because the earliest written segments that we have seem to come from the 500s. That doesn't mean there was nothing earlier. The Assyrians burned Jerusalem to the ground. Might have been the Babylonians, actually. But they burned Jerusalem to the ground. If they were using papyrus, they would have lost everything. If they were using stone tablets, they might have been broken during the battles. So we don't know for certain that there was nothing. It's just the current evidence that we have only goes back so far. I was really hopeful for that one lead tablet that they found a couple of years ago. It seems like that's inconclusive at best right now. But I think that as we look more and more through all of these things, the Babylonians would not know things about what was going on in the Levant until from between like 1200 and the 600s. They just wouldn't. They weren't there. They might hear stuff through trade, but they wouldn't know the specifics of what was happening while the Israelites were in the wilderness. They'd have no way of knowing that. The Canaanites do share some things, but most of the stuff that people claim the Israelites took from another religion is Mesopotamian, not Canaanite. The Canaanites just have some of the same words because they have the most similar language. And then if we look at, you know, it's interesting. If you look at the earliest kind of like Canaanite mythology we see, a lot of it comes from Carthage. And the Carthaginian stuff does not look like it matches Israelite stuff. I mean, you get a few things here and there, but it seems pretty divorced. So why are we claiming that all of these things are connected when the evidence is so bare bones? There's much more evidence that all of these religions started from a common point and grew outward from there, which is crazy. It's the kind of thing that would happen if, like, a whole bunch of different people started in one point and then grew out from there. You know? Like if somebody sent them across the earth or something after confounding their languages.
It's almost like there was, I don't know, maybe a god or something that that flicked everyone different directions. Yeah.
How preposterous.
Yeah. So before all of this happens, though, we get multiple versions of this flood story. And we get multiple reasons for the flood. In Mesopotamia, sometimes it's that one god was angry at another god or was angry at a king. In the Canaanite, I don't totally remember. The Zoroastrians, that's an Indo-European religion. Fun little fact, everybody thinks it's Middle Eastern. It technically is, but it's Indo-European. They have a freeze. It gets really cold. And if you know where the Indo-Europeans come from, that makes a lot of sense because they're from Russia. Not modern Russia as we conceive of it, but the Caspian Steppe. But all of this gets linked back in Christianity and Judaism to the flood and the reasons for the flood. And you get a few different concepts there. You have, what were the three that you mentioned earlier?
I said it was either it existed prior to...
No, the Sethite and...
Oh, yeah. I
got to read that off.
Yeah. So it was... first that the Targums and the chief Jewish expositors, that they were the nobles and the men of high rank. The second was that they were angels. And the third was that, which is the most generally accepted interpretation based on, I got this from Ellicott's commentary for English readers, says the most generally accepted interpretation in modern times is that the sons of Elohim were the Sethites.
Yes.
And that they married for mere lust of beauty, universal corruption soon ensued, yada, yada, yada.
So is that the one you've heard too?
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that before.
That is the scholarly academic opinion about what this says. I'm going to read Genesis 6:1-4 to you guys from the King James. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took wives of all of it which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of men came unto the daughters of women, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and bare children to them, and the same that became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So I want to then go back, and I want to read that from a more literal translation, because I think that matters.
Which one is it?
This is the Lexham English Bible.
Okay.
And it happened that, when humankind began to multiply on the face of the ground, daughters were born to them. Then the sons of God saw the daughters of humankind, that they were beautiful, and they took for themselves wives from all that they chose. And Yahweh said, My spirit shall not abide with humankind forever, in that he is also flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were in the earth on those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humankind, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty warriors that were from ancient times, men of renown. And then immediately after that, we get, And Yahweh saw that the evil of humankind was great upon the earth, and every inclination of the thoughts in his heart was always only evil. And Yahweh regretted that he had made humankind on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And Yahweh said, I will destroy humankind, whom I created from upon the face of the earth, from humankind to animals to creeping things, and to the birds of heaven, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh, and I think this is important, because what we get is that Noah was a righteous man without defect in his generations. And in the Bible, what generations means, almost every time it's used, is lineage. Their fathers, fathers, and onward. And if you look at what's said here, his spirit is also flesh. What's that mean? Divine beings are pure spirit. They have no bodies. They can appear in the form of humans. They can appear in the form of blinding wheels of eyes. But they inhabit a spiritual realm. And so there's this grave sin that occurs here, where you have these spiritual beings who are full of what you might call an arcane sort of knowledge. And you have these physical beings that are not supposed to possess that. And there has been a merging of these two things. And this is directly what leads to the flood. And the reason I bring that up is because the Sethite hypothesis is just washing that away. It is totally changing the entire meaning here. And I think that's relevant to the person of God and the intention of God. Because if we take the Sethite point of view, that the sons of God here are just the righteous men, and that the daughters of men here, and this makes no sense, by the way, because remember, like, why does men just refer to the line of Cain, and also, like, where did they come from? If we go with that explanation, God basically killed everybody because some people weren't worshiping him, which he doesn't seem to have the same opinion after that at any point. If you take the line of thinking that B'nai Elohim means sons of God here in the same way that it means sons of God literally everywhere else in the New Testament, which is these divine beings, the divine heavenly host, the other chief angels, so to speak, well, then God's decision-making makes sense here. Because he did not intend to create a hybrid species. He did not, that was not the idea. And that's going to ruin a lot of things, and he's watching as the good which he created is turning to evil because these rebellious spirits, these rebellious angels, have come down and corrupted humankind, have driven humankind away from what is right. They're teaching humans all sorts of things that are causing them pain. They're teaching them about war. They're teaching them about industry to an extent, which, really early, maybe Ted Kaczynski was just reading the Old Testament. But then it makes more sense. Then God isn't just cleansing the earth because he feels like people are being naughty. He's cleansing the earth because everybody has been infected by this, angelic blood disease, you might call it, except for Noah. And that's why he picks Noah, because Noah is blameless in his generations. He is not defected in his lineage. He is purely human. And so God's decision-making in Genesis 6:4 makes a lot more sense if the Nephilim are the sons of God, or if the Nephilim are the sons of the Watchers who are themselves the sons of God. And that ties back because then the Nephilim really can be the origin of demons, if they are half-deity. Because what you get here is that they, when they die, this is Heiser's hypothesis, this is how he sees things, or saw things, R.I.P., their spirits can't go to heaven because they are the result of angelic rebellion. They were born on the earth, they will remain in the earth. And we hear about the Rephaim and the disembodied spirits of the dead, and these are, in some places, talked about how the Rephaim and the Anakim are connected, and the Anakim are connected to the Nephilim. So the Rephaim and the Nephilim have a connection. And we also hear that, this we don't see possession. We don't see demonic influence in the Bible prior to this. This is the first time it appears. And then you start to see the demonic episodes after the flood. You start to see people being possessed after the flood. Heiser writes, this is the part that I said just goes really hard. Because this is from Enoch, which Enoch, not scripture, but it is context. And to Gabriel God said, "Go, Gabriel, to the bastards, to the half-breeds, to the sons of miscegenation. Destroy the sons of the Watchers from among the sons of men. Send them against one another in a war of destruction. And the length of days they will not have, and no petition will be granted to their fathers on their behalf, that they should expect to live an eternal life, nor even that each of them should live 500 years. Excuse me. And to Michael he said, "Go, Michael, bind Shimyaza and the others with him, who have united themselves with the daughters of men, so that they were defiled by them in their uncleanliness. And when their sons perish and they see the destruction of their loved ones, bind them for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, until the day of their judgment and consummation, until the eternal judgment is consummated. Then they will be led away to the fiery abyss and to the torture and to the prison where they will be confined forever." That is specifically, very specifically, about angelic divine beings. That's not about humans. And while not everything in Enoch lines up properly, that does. And what we get in Enoch after this is is that when the Nephilim are killed by war and then eventually the flood, their spirits remain in the earth. And the hypothesis here is basically that the things we understand as demons, because how many times, Isaiah, have you read about an angel possessing a person?
None.
Aha. These are something different. Demons possess people. They are their own classification, as far as this is concerned, of divine spiritual beings that are in opposition to God and that serve that original rebel from the garden, the serpent, the Nachash, which is, of course, the character we now today perceive as Satan. And so that, if you take the Enochian view, that's the origin of demons, is that this is all about the Nephilim. This is all tying back to that Genesis incident with the flood, and that up until Christ, this is one of the really interesting things about it, up until Christ, there was no way to deal with it. Part of the reason that Christ is so impressive to the Second Temple Jewish people is that he is doing something nobody in history has ever done before. They even say as much. If I can swing back to it really quick. As they were going away, behold, a demon-oppressed man who was mute was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the mute man spoke. And the crowds marveled, saying, never was anything like this seen in Israel. But the Pharisees said, he casts out demons by the prince of demons. And he called to him his 12, this is a different one now. And he called to him his 12 disciples and gave them the authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction. These 12 Jesus sent out, instructing them, go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. So there's this huge aspect of the New Testament about who Jesus is that is directly related to his ability to cast the spirits of the Nephilim out of human beings. Because prior to that, they just killed them.
I gotta say, the before I make any comments on that, Isaiah, thoughts, questions, comments, angry retorts?
I could see it potentially. That I don't really register the Book of Enoch as anything factual, but that one verse isn't anything like crazy heretical or anything. It's just kind of expounding on what is said in Genesis, where it's like I mean, to say that Gabriel said it and whatnot, it's potentially heretical, but that's, neither here nor there. The part where it's like, go to the bastards and cast them out and stuff like that. Yeah, that all matches up with, what the Nephilim are, but, hypothetically in Genesis and things like that. I wouldn't, yeah, it can make sense to me as these kind of hybrids between humanity and angels that perhaps their spirit is not something that is relegated to heaven or hell or an afterlife like we know it. Perhaps it is something that's forever looming, and maybe that's where possession comes from. So I could see it being that way. I could also still see just, devils meaning devils, and that people possessed with devils are in fact that. Like, sure, angels never possess people in the Bible, but angels are also shown in the Bible to be beings of good that aren't looking to, attack humanity, whereas devils are removed from the glory of God and become more sinister, more evil, and maybe that's why they possess where angels don't. I could see it either way, but I do say it is an interesting idea that perhaps the spirits of the Nephilim could be some of those like unclean spirits or those possessions that we see occur later. That's interesting, especially because like in stories like the Maniac of Gedare, it's not like the demons or the angels, whatever, get cast out of him, and then they go about doing whatever they were before. Yeah. It's like they're these creatures that have to have some kind of host, because they beg Jesus to let them go into the swine of the country, and Jesus lets them and says they go into the swine and run off a cliff. So it's like, what was that about? Like, you would think if it's some demon that can't, has power over like the demons mentioned in the Old Testament that were gods and were things like the Prince of Persia that did war against Michael and stuff like that. You'd think these powerful beings wouldn't need to possess pigs and then kill themselves off the side of a cliff. But maybe if like these spirits, which I've mentioned before, maybe, the definitions between spirits and demons in the Bible is kind of vague. Maybe if these demons are things of the Nephilim that don't have the power to exist on their own and they have to have a host, like a parasite almost, then that would be, I don't know, that's an interesting idea. I do think that's also interesting for another point, because Jesus, whenever he would give his parables, there's a section in Matthew when he's talking about the faith of a mustard seed and stuff, when it says that the teachings of holiness, like the teachings of the spiritual, were designed in the very fabric of the world. So the way that things work in our physical realm, everything from plants to the way food works and stuff like that, are all representative of things in the spiritual realm. Mm-hmm. So perhaps then parasites are a, manifestation of what this kind of spirit was. Like, it's an interesting idea. I admit I never thought of it that way, but it's a fun thought concept.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I like it. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think a lot of the modern sort of the reason that the modern understanding of demons seems to be so disparate, and it goes in so many different directions, might come a lot from the terminology as well. If you look at the New Testament, you basically see the word demon used for all of it. Angels, sons of God, you get it when it's Elohim, it splits. Sometimes you get angelos, sometimes you get theos.
Mm-hmm.
So changes. But when in the Old Testament, there's not much use of the term demons in Hebrew. But there's no use of it in Hebrew. In the Septuagint, I think it shows up 3 times. The Greeks, not the Greeks, the Jews who were translating it into Greek, they tended to render any evil spirit as daimon or daimonia, or something like that. The Hebrew, however, has a whole bunch of different terms for spiritual beings. And for the evil ones, it has the Rephaim, which are the disembodied spirits of the dead. We also have this one's Mawet, or Met, death. This is specifically disembodied spirits of the human dead. We have Ob and Oborim, which are those who have passed over. So these are spirits that can be human or inhuman. We have, I have no idea how to pronounce this one in Hebrew, but Knowing One. And this one's really interesting because it's specifically mentioned along with abominable practices, where it says, if we go to Leviticus 19:31, do not turn to the spirits, Obat, to the ones who have knowledge, that's the one I don't know how to pronounce, do not seek them out, and so make yourselves unclean by them. I am Yahweh your God. So this word, Obat, does not get used for angels. It does get used for things that we might perceive as demons, for spirits of ancestors, for the Rephaim, things like that. But then we have, if a person turns to the spirits, to those who have knowledge, whoring after them, I will set my face against that person and will cut him off from among his people. A man or woman who has a spirit or knowing one in them shall surely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones, their blood shall be upon them, which is, they're saying that nobody will be held accountable for their death because of the situation. The warning here is basically don't seek out, the English renders this as mediums in most cases. The warning here is do not seek out diviners, people who will communicate with the spirits to try and tell the future, try and achieve greatness, any of those kinds of things, because they will lie to you, and they will corrupt you, and they will take you away from the face of the Lord. That's not what you want if you're an ancient Israelite. But what I think is really interesting about it is in these passages, we get, do not turn to the spirits. Here, wait, hang on. Which one was it? A man or woman who has a spirit or knowing one. Knowing one sounds like it's probably something more akin to an angel or a fallen angel, whereas spirit is a much broader concept here. So there's clearly different classifications of evil spirits in the Old Testament. The Greek just renders them as demon. There's a few other ones in here. We have Metim, which is Metim is the one that applies to the human dead. We have Hidden One. That one's super obscure, and I don't totally understand it yet, so I don't even want to go to that. But then you also get what you talked about earlier, the princes. That's a different classification entirely. These are terms that denote entities with geographical dominion. We have territorial spirits, which are the Shedim. In the Bible, we get, they, the Israelites, sacrificed to demons, Shedim, that were no gods, Eloah, to gods, Elohim, they had never known. And then we also have prince, which is something that you get in you see it very prominently in Daniel 10, because we have that the prince of Persia delayed an unnamed prince, this man who approaches Daniel. We have this man who approaches Daniel say, I was withstood by the prince of Persia 21 days. But then one of the chief princes, Michael, came and assisted me. And then he says, I'm going to return to Persia, and the prince of Greece will likely follow after. So in Daniel, this is perceived as not necessarily a prophecy, but a prophetic retelling of the Alexandrian conquest. And of course, here we get what follows after that is that there will be a goat there will be a ram with 2 horns that represent the Medes and the Persians. That comes from the east, and it spreads out north, south, and west. And then there will be a goat with 1 horn that comes from the west that will defeat the ram, break its horns, but then the goat, its horn will break into 4 horns, one of which will grow towards the sky and will knock down some of the host of heaven, which is pretty obviously describing Alexander and the Diadochi. And if you look at Jewish history, the horn that reaches down and sweeps some of the host of heaven is probably the Seleucids. Some people say it's specifically Antiochus IV. I don't think that makes sense. It's too broad. But the Seleucid Empire was what it did was it came, and at first the Jews felt like they were tolerated, and then the Seleucids started selling the office of high priest, and then you had a whole bunch of turmoil, and then finally Antiochus got sick of it and just decided to close the temple and make it profane, put his own altars there, get rid of the altar to the Jewish God. And this is what inspires the Maccabean Revolt, which is what Hanukkah is about. So, where was I? I got lost.
Brother, I'm not going to lie. That was a lot of stuff all at once.
Yeah. Right. I was talking about the princes. I was talking about the princes. So, what you get there, though, in Daniel, keep in mind, this is the Bible. This is not Enoch. This is not intertestamental. This is not a different, related religion from another Semitic group. This is Daniel. And in Daniel, we get a very clear explanation that these divine princes, specifically, have dominion over entire nations, and that they have the power to not only do they have the power, but they have the will to fight one another. And I think that's a really interesting one, but what's important about it is that is entirely divorced in the scripture from all of those other evil spirits. These guys are a specific, these are the guys mentioned in Job when Satan appears in the council of the Most High, and God asks him, where have you been? And he goes, going to and fro in the earth. All of that episode and Deuteronomy and Psalm and all of these things, these are discussing a specific class of beings that gets, relegated to demonic status in the New Testament. But in the Old Testament, there seems to be a lot more going on. I don't know. I just find it interesting. I was curious about your guys' thoughts.
You want to take that one?
My thoughts around which part specifically?
I guess mostly the differentiation between princes and these lower spirits.
I think that it is, again, I'm kind of the opinion that they're, the fallen angels and stuff like that, right? So I would say that things like the princes are definitely fallen angels. It'd be hard to move me from that one. Whereas
I agree with you there.
Are either lower classifications of fallen angels, or like you mentioned, I would be willing to believe the idea that maybe it's some other kind of spirit, or like Nephilim spirit or something along that lines. But I think the princes are undoubtedly fallen angels, because that's a direct holdover from the classifications of angels, right? So it makes sense that there's a that if you have potentially fallen angels that are in the same ranking as angels, then they're probably fallen angels. Yeah.
All right. So I guess what I'm trying to drill down to is, with the classifications of spirits, how do we square, do you think they could all be fallen angels, or do you think the fallen angels kind of have their little lieutenants? Because that's the way I'm perceiving it.
I mean, if angels have their lieutenants, right, then it would make sense to me that when several of them defected, that they maintain their rank or develop new ones or something along those lines. I would say, like, again, my opinion is that they are all fallen angels, right? And I think a third of the angels is a lot. So I think, yeah, perhaps they make up different qualifications. Perhaps there's ones of different rank. Perhaps there's one of different responsibility, of areas of purpose, stuff like that. I don't necessarily know that they are in a hierarchy where Lucifer sits at the head. I mean, it would make sense as he is the one who's most often mentioned, the one who wants to best God. But at the same time, there may not be a, sort of chain of command amongst them. It could just be those of different power go about their own selfish desires, right? And they're all kind of acting in their own accord. I don't know about that. I could honestly swing either way, but I think that I'm of the opinion that they're different types of fallen angels.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think about? I didn't go into it too much, but there's kind of the implication in the Old Testament that the afterlife doesn't seem like there's necessarily what you get with New Testament hell, so to speak, but the afterlife it talks about in here is that you have the Metim are amongst the Rephaim. The Rephaim, of course, are connected back to the Nephilim, and that they are all in the afterlife. What do you think about that? Like, why does heaven appear afterwards? Or were we in the realm of the demons after life or after death?
So, so there's certainly some instances of being with God after death in the Old Testament, right? I mean, two very literal examples of that are Enoch and Elijah, right? Where they quite literally like went to God. And there's other examples of that, like in the Old Testament when David talked about like the kings that came before are with God or they're with each other and stuff like that. So there certainly was some promise of being with God. Now we don't know exactly what that promise looked like or if it was the same as heaven as it's explained now or what. Because the other belief, this is like, I forget which groups have this feeling. The other belief is that basically no one got into heaven until Jesus Christ, right? Because that was a payment for sins. And that the following of the law prevented it. It didn't like make you go to heaven. It just effectively put you on a wait list.
Right.
So that when Jesus Christ died on the cross, which is where the whole thing, there's a word for it, but when the belief that after Jesus died on the cross, he went to hell and pulled the sinners out of perdition and took them up to heaven. That whole idea, I know it was especially popular in early Catholic traditions, at least, that when Jesus died on the cross, everyone that was either in hell or a purgatory of sorts was then ripped up to heaven because of the sacrifice of Christ. I don't necessarily believe that, because then it makes me ask questions like, okay, well then why did Enoch and Elijah get to skip line? Like I get they were liked and everything, but if the whole dying on the cross was that big of a deal, why did they get a cut in front of everyone? And also some other instances, like if that was the case, then what is David talking about when he talks about like with the fathers or with the kings that came before him and stuff like that, and at the side of God. And especially in Psalms, it talks about like after death being united with God. It's like, okay, but if the whole Jesus thing is that way, then you don't know about it yet. I think that the following of the law was effectively salvation in the sense that when you die, you're reunited with God. But I don't know. I maybe there was something. Sometimes I'm like, what if like time, right? what if time as we
that's going in and out
like,
of context video.
I know. What if like time as we see it is like our understanding of this experience in this place that we have, and then whenever we die, we are separated from that experience, and we're then put effectively in the bounds of heaven. So therefore, regardless of when on a calendar you die, everyone gets there at the same time or something like that. I'm not, to clarify, I am not preaching that. I am not saying that's supported in the scripture anywhere. I'm just saying that when we get to the questions of how did people before Jesus Christ interact with heaven and eternity and stuff like that, it is such a broad topic that has so many solutions that the answer could be anywhere, right? Gotcha. But no, I don't think they necessarily like went to hell. I do hear where you're coming from, where it mentions like with the Raphaim and stuff like that. But at the same time, just like in the modern age, there's those who choose to side with God and those who don't, and there's different like solutions for them in the afterlife based on that. Like in the Old Testament would have been the same way. Like if you have the people who are righteous and follow after God and follow the law of the Old Testament, then where does everyone who sacrificed babies to Baal go, right? That is an afterlife. That would probably relate to the Raphaim and all those other creatures and stuff like that. So maybe it was the exact same heaven and hell. Maybe their descriptions of it were a little different. Maybe it works. I'm just happy that I live after Christ, so
you don't have to worry about it.
yeah. Ain't got to worry about that. I'm taken care of. And as far as I know, everyone who's listening does as well. But yeah, like maybe it was something different, but I don't think there was necessarily a punishment aside from the fact you had to follow the law. I don't think there was necessarily a punishment for those who live and died pre-Christ.
Gotcha.
I don't think, at least. But again, I don't know.
Right. So just last thing before we want to get to super chats, I wanted to ask you about this because
I looked over.
What?
I said the time thing. I looked over and the first comment I saw said, "What?" I'm just saying, like hypothetically, it's whatever.
He's just saying that there's something significant about the passage of time, and when time passes, it's significant because when the significance of time passes. Okay.
Where are you going with this?
When you win. Yeah.
Okay, but the last thing I wanted to ask about.
The heroin. Okay, that was it. The thing about I said there's a word for when Jesus went to hell post crucifixion. It's called the heroin.
Yeah.
That's the word that like early Catholics use. The heroin of hell. Yeah. Thank you.
So the last thing I wanted to ask before we get to super chats, because I think you'd have the better knowledge base on it. Gone over. We've kind of debated a little bit, discussed what demons are, where they come from, how they are classified, all of that. What about the Big Daddy demon? Satan, because we don't see a ton of Satan himself interacting with individuals in the Old Testament. Then in the New Testament, we get a direct confrontation between Jesus and Satan, which is literally, if you think about what this is, God and Satan, just square it up. And Satan is trying to tempt Jesus. He's trying to, basically interrogate him. Can you tell us a little bit about why that episode is important and what happens?
Yeah, so there is a ton of mentions of like demons and Satan and stuff like that in the New Testament, as Aiden mentioned. There's a ton of times where we get kind of the modern interpretation of it or whatever. Like for example, there's one story that's really weird that no one brings up in the book of Acts, where a group of like new believers try to exorcise a demon and the demon literally taunts them. It's really weird. It's very much so in line with so this is proving a point back to your question.
Oh, you're good.
It's in the book of Acts in chapter 19 when it says a group of there were 7 sons of one Sceva, a Jew and chief of the priests, which did so, and they it says that
said it was
Acts chapter 19.
Gotcha.
It says that a group of exorcists took upon them to call over them which had evil spirits the name of the Lord Jesus, saying, "We adjure you by Jesus whom Paul preacheth." So it's like a group of people who are new to the whole religion thing are like, we're going to cast out demons. We're going to learn how to do it. And it says they effectively tie someone up and they're like, "We cast you out in the name of Paul." And it says the evil spirit answered and said, "Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are ye?" And which one terrified? That's like that is the most stereotypical modern demon impersonation I've ever heard of.
That is something right out of The Conjuring or Insidious.
Yeah, literally. Like they have him tied up. He's like, "I know Paul, I know Jesus. Who are you?" Like the demon doesn't recognize him. And then it says, "And the man in whom the evil spirit was leaped on them and overcame them and prevailed against them, so that they fled out of the house naked and wounded."
Dude took their clothes.
Yeah, he shredded them. Just like
he's like literally
conjuring, like attacking them. Yeah, like so you have a bunch of instances like that in the New Testament. And there's several times where demons are mentioned. That, like there's in Jesus's parables where he talks about unclean spirits when it possesses a man, or when several unclean spirits possess a man, which again gets into the whole thing of like, why does he say spirit sometime and why devils the other time? Are these two different things? Are they the same thing? Which honestly, I kind of like your theory the more I think about it, about like it being like Nephilim of some kind. That does kind of make sense. That it'd be a hybrid instead of just a fallen angel. I'd be willing to hear something like that. But anyway, there's a bunch of mentions of them, but the big one, as you're talking about, is the temptation of Christ. So to me, the temptation of Christ is the most applicable one. Like, sure, there's mentions of what I just read where demons literally possess a guy and then the demon jumps up and attacks them, right? But we don't really see that a lot. Like, sure, there's stories about it, and I don't discount fully exorcist stories and things like that. Like, I don't know how it works. Sure, I'm gonna be afraid of it either way. But where we most often come across like demonic presence or evil, at least in my opinion, is when it comes to temptation, right? Because if Jesus Christ was truly the Son of God, and if he died on the cross, then that means we win, right? Because, you know, the Son of God made the sacrifice for humanity, and there is no convoluted path or direction or anything like that you have to take to get to him. You just have to believe. You literally just have to believe. It is a soulful decision, right? It can be out loud. It can be to yourself. It is the ultimate checkmate to any of the devil's tricks or motives, right? So the only thing the devil can do is prevent you or other people from getting to that conclusion, right? And if you're already saved, then he can't do that with you. Like, well, once under grace, always under grace, at least in my belief, right? Even if you are of the belief that you can lose your salvation, you still know how to get back to it, right? You may not do it, but you know where it's at. So he can't do that. But what he can do is he can prevent you from getting that news to other people. So I think that the most common thing the devil does isn't possessing us or possessing people around us, if he even would have the power to possess someone who's saved, which I wouldn't think so. Because, you know, as I believe Paul said, greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world, right? That's actually one of the parables that Jesus spoke about, that if someone is keeping the house, then no new man can enter the house. Talking about if you have Christ in you, then, you know, no non-religious, no demon can enter you effectively, right? But it's not like the demons go around possessing people and attacking. What it does is try to disable you from being an effective Christian. So we have the perfect example of that with the temptation of Christ, Jesus Christ, which by the way, if the whole reason that the devil's defeated is because Christ died on the cross, this was the devil's Hail Mary, right? This Jesus guy is born, and it's going to be a big deal if he dies. So the whole reason Jesus died is a big deal is because he's the only sinless man. So if we can make him not sinless, that'd be great. Yeah.
Also, the devil's Hail Mary needs to be a band name or something. That's
Devil's Hail Mary.
Yeah. That goes hard.
So Jesus Christ, he was human in that he felt human emotions. He knew what fear was. We see in the Garden of Gethsemane that he was so scared he cried tears of blood, right? He knew what rage was. He ran the taxpayers out of the temple. So he knew what temptation was. It's not like Jesus Christ was a young man who saw women and simply looked at them as like, yes, object, a thing that does not have any prevalence to me, right? No, he was probably attracted to people. He probably had like desire to eat and drink. He probably felt social pressure, which is a weird thing to think about. But Jesus Christ was human. He experienced all the emotions humanity did, but he had the perfect knowledge of God, and throughout his entire life was the only sinless person to ever exist, the only one to fully push away from that. Like, sure, he felt emotions, but he never gave into them. So the temptation was an attempt to make Jesus give into them, and the devil offered him everything. Jesus was hungry, and he offered him food, and you're like, okay, well, if you're hungry, what's wrong with eating food? But it was because, as tradition at the time and around it, it is not acceptable to take food from the devils, to take food from false gods and stuff like that, right? So if the devil is offering you food, well, guess where the food came from? It's not acceptable to take them of the temples of other gods, so Jesus abstains there. The devil offers him the temples of the world, of all the beautiful women he could ever want, of all the majesty he could want, and Jesus refused him then. And eventually he puts Jesus on the top of a tower, It says the angels can come and save you, which, as Jesus says, would be temptation. And he says, tempt not the Lord thy God. So like he tempts Jesus with lust of women, lust of the world. He tempts him with lust of the body, lust of, like filling yourself, and lust of fear, right? Like to tempt God at the fear that you're going to die, with quite literally falling off of a tower.
Yeah.
Like all the things that would be completely normal to us, places where we would falter, but Jesus had the perfect knowledge of God and was able to abstain from it. So like none of us will be Jesus in our perfection. You can try. None of us will be wholly perfect in everything that we do, but most of what Jesus does in the Bible isn't tell us what we have to do. He gives us an example of what we should try to do. So we see here that when the devil, the capital D devil, tries to confront God with temptations of things that we've all experienced, temptations of fear, temptations of lust, temptations of, gluttony, what have you, that Jesus used the words of the Bible. He didn't make anything up. He used the same words we read in order to rebuke the devil. So we're not going to get it right every time, but it is a perfect example of when the devil tries to approach us with those temptations, we do the same thing Christ did and use the book that he left us to move ourselves away from that. Because ultimately what the devil's trying to do is to keep us from being that Christian. Sure, we're not going to go die on the cross and save humanity from their sins like Christ did, but we can tell others that Christ did that, which is effectively the same thing on a smaller scale. So if the devil can disable us from doing that, then that's all he has to, that's all he's got. That's his only move that he can pull off at this point. So as long as we do the same thing Christ did against the devil, whenever we are confronted with the devil, well, we can get to our end goal and the best outcome just like Jesus did. That's what I think that's
there. It is. I knew we'd get one. I knew it'd come. A good old Wendigoon sermon.
Sunday school teacher moment, yeah. Yeah. Can't help myself.
That's why I love doing this show with you, is because I feel like you know how to say things in a way that makes them feel a lot better.
It's a Sunday school teacher thing. You have to like stare at 14-year-olds and be like, don't think about something else. Don't think about listen to me. Listen to me.
So in a way, I think what you said there about how the devil, Satan himself can only tempt, and we have these other princes over the nations. It kind of makes sense when you think about it that this is the kind of temptation that would have been given to the king of every single nation in history, so that they would worship their prince over God. And why you would get thou shalt have no other gods before me and things like that is like, hey, I can give you all of those things and I will give you all of those things, but you gotta trust me on it. And this is Jesus being the first person ever really to show that total trust.
Well, I mean, like, think about it this way, like throughout the Bible, what reason would God possibly have to not want to give us everything unless it was explicitly bad for us, right? Like Paul wrote about it. I was reading in Romans the other day where Paul was writing to the church at Rome, and he was talking about people who were saying they were in poverty and stuff like that. He said, know ye not that the Father sent his Son to die for you, that he gave you eternal life? Would he not therefore wish to give you all things? Like we get so hung up about like, oh, well, what if I don't get money? What if I don't? It's like, he died for you, right? So like, spit forever. What are you talking about money? Or are you talking about this other stuff for? Now, that's not to say I'm not trying to get in prosperity gospel of like, if you believe in God, things will go well for you. But if Jesus really loves you, then of course he wants to give you everything that he possibly could, right? Again, unless it's bad for you, unless it leads you to temptation. We have dozens of examples of that in the Bible. David had hundreds of wives. He had every woman he could ever want. And he saw one that was married to one of his war captains and said, no, that one. God knew
just
that
one more.
Just that one specifically. The one that one of my best generals has, I want that one. And like God, like that is the thing David wanted, but God didn't give it to him because it would cause pain. It would cause harm. It would cause David to fall into sin and David to lose his testimony among the people. It says after that after that whole saga with Bathsheba's over, that Israel knew forever that his house was not a house in order.
Mhm.
It permanently damaged David's reputation as a king and as a leader and as a man of God because he wanted to do that. So God knew that David wanted to get it. He didn't want David to have Bathsheba because God wants to cross his arms and be like, no, no, no. He wanted David to not have Bathsheba because he knew how much damage it would cause. So the devil's whole point is to be like, yeah, here's Bathsheba. Like, yeah, you want this? Absolutely, go for it. God will always give you the things you need and the things you want that will be good for you, where the devil will always give you the things you need and the things you want that he knows will be bad for you.
Yeah.
And it's really, again, especially as a Christian, it's really not hard to tell the difference. You often know when you should want something and when you shouldn't want something.
Mhm.
And if it is only satisfying for the moment and you'll regret it later, I've got news. That is not how holy blessings work. Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that means it's super chat time.
It is indeed. And the first one comes from Don't Take My Kidneys for $5, saying, thank you for another episode. Great name, yeah. The question is, have you considered the resurrection for an episode topic?
We
did cover that.
Yeah,
didn't
we had an Easter episode.
Easter. Yeah, for
Yeah.
Easter.
We have a whole episode on it. I think it's a long
Well-
one too.
Well considered.
Yeah, definitely.
This was this past Easter. We did.
Yeah, this was this past Easter.
Yeah.
Because I think we also briefly went over why Easter isn't pagan.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Neither is Christmas, and neither is Halloween. Halloween's a little funky, but it's not a Christianized pagan holiday.
Believe it or
Mhm.
not, we've done a few videos of that about on the Lore Lodge.
Yeah.
Check it out. Yeah, fair enough. That was a very quick response. So I will say the vast majority of these
Uh-huh.
are people saying thank you to both of you in a variety of different ways
Appreciate it.
for bringing them closer to the faith and
Aw.
attributing both of you for being the reason that they either came to faith at all
Well, thank
or
you.
rediscovered it at some level.
I'm glad to hear that.
Means a lot. I didn't. I am nothing. I own a webcam. That's the only thing I have to offer the world. I'm not special. I am just a sign that points in that direction. So I'm very glad that I got a point for you. It means a lot. I am like, my favorite answer in the Bible is John the Baptist. When the Pharisees came to him and said, "Who are you?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness." I'm just a guy who yells a lot. That's all I really got going for me. Yeah.
It's working out well.
Very, very underrated biblical character.
Yeah.
Like John the Baptist must have been such a chill dude.
Ascalor for $5 says, "Can you break down the origin and history of muscular Christianity in a future podcast?"
This again.
Also, once Aiden explains it, what's your
Muscular?
opinion on it? Yeah.
Okay.
Could we at least get a definition of what that is and what is he
All right,
referring
people
to?
keep bringing it up on my Friday streams. For those who don't know, I stream video games with my buddies on Fridays. We play a variety of things. Been some Space Marines, some Helldivers lately. Space Marine though has this gothic aesthetic to it. Now, of course, it's much more than just your basic gothic aesthetic, but it's rooted in that kind of thing. And it came up because I think somebody was asking me about like how jacked all the Space Marines are or whatever. I'm not a big Warhammer lore guy, so I don't really know much. I have other people who sit in on the streams and help me with that. But muscular Christianity, we found out because of this, is a like late 1800s, early 1900s concept about how, your body being a temple and being in the image of God should be something that is strong physically, and that, in order to be a good Christian, you also need to be physically fit. So it was basically Christianity is not just, of the mind, it's also of the body.
Of the body.
And so if you want to be a good Christian, it'll reflect itself in you being
That's my high school's motto.
Yeah. Which granted, like if you look at it, what was in 1900 was very different from now.
Yeah. No, my high school's motto is literally mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it was the Episcopal Academy.
Yeah. Isaiah, this is for you from BB Bunny for $5. Wendy, I want to hear about some of the things you did to help after the storm. Aiden gives high praise. You're a wonderful wonder. Thank you.
I did gas you up a little bit on our stream about the hurricane.
That is very kind. I appreciate that. I'm not I do not accept any monikers of doing. I was a documentarian. I got asked to come in because there were. I have several friends who are military or former military who were running these areas for like aid, and the higher ups in like the military wanted to have on the ground information, like pictures and videos of how bad it was. And they were like, "Oh, I know a YouTuber." So I went with people and I documented everything I could to send on to important people who can do a job. I have friends who, like, in the first days of it, they didn't sleep. They were looking for people. They were trying to find ways out. They were clearing roads to try to get evacuees out. Those guys are the heroes. Those are the guys who actually did something. I held a camera and watched them do it. So.
I don't know how much
I witnessed a lot of great things happen, but I was not one of them. I guarantee it. Like,
I don't know how much you want to speak on it, but having been there during a lot of the early stages of kind of recovery there, what are some of the things that you saw, not necessarily in terms of like the horrors or whatever, but like in terms of the response? Because I know there's been a lot of questions and comments about that. If there's not a lot you've seen or that you can comment on, no worries, but I'm just curious, was there anything of note that you can speak on?
Everyone was helping, and like I mean, like there was I went to a local elementary school that was being run as an aid center, and I found out it was being ran by a couple who lost their house, business, and vehicles in the flood. And the dad, or sorry, they don't have kids, the husband had a key to the local elementary school. I think he like coached basketball or something like that. He had a key. So they're like, okay, I guess we sleep in the gym. And they slept there a couple days, and then people showed up and were like, hey, can we store supplies here? Because there's not a lot of community hubs in the mountains. So people just start loading the gym with stuff. And by the time I got there, like 5 days afterwards, it had become a restock center for local aid shelters. It had become a transport site for people to get in and out of the area. And a doctor showed up and was treating people out of the cafeteria. So these are two people who have absolutely nothing, who are now running like a over 100-person operation. And I asked, like, how can you guys even do this? And they were like, well, if we can do this, then what else can we do? And it's just like, I met so many people like that, people who lost everything, who are just like, yeah, I have to help because I'm still above ground, aren't I? How could I not?
Yeah.
So I met a lot of those guys. The government was helpful. I saw a bunch of like people criticizing their actions and stuff like that because they were late. And my answer to that is yeah, because they don't live with us. Like it took me 5 days to get in there, and they got there about the same time and started showing up. And the big issue, like I got to speak to like heads of FEMA, or like heads of like local groups of FEMA, and they were basically like, yeah, well, we go to check on people, and every single house we check on has already been taken care of by local volunteer fire departments or local people just getting people out of the area. Like we go check on all the high risk people that are like elderly, need medication and stuff, and they're already taken care of. So there's not a lot we can do. And some people hear that and get mad, whereas my answer is good. They were already taken care of. That's good. Yeah, nice. Good job, guys.
I also I feel bad for the rank and file at FEMA because they are basically volunteers with how little money they make. Other than the higher ups, every FEMA worker I met is like, oh, I volunteered out of New Jersey or something like that. Like they just showed up to help, and they're getting like, why are you trying to arrest us for? It's like, calm down. If everyone is already saved, that they can't save anyone, great. we did really good. Yeah, like,
we won, guys.
I think a lot of the complaints were people who like wanted to go in and help and weren't being allowed in because, and like, I get it. On the one hand, it's like, yeah, there's definitely still people missing. It would be great to be able to get in and find them, but too many cooks in the kitchen on a search and rescue op is not good.
Okay, so I will say this. So we were there for like 4 or 5 days. Everything was fine. The 6th day, it may not have been exactly 6 days. I feel like a week into it, it immediately became an issue of way too many people there.
Yeah.
We had been doing runs on dirt bikes to this one area to deliver like supplies and like medicine and stuff. And we went like for the third time, and a state trooper told us like, no, you can't go in there. And we were like, what gives or whatever. And then we look, and there were, I kid you not, at least 50 like Jeeps and four-wheelers and stuff like that had all shown up to go up that same road because they heard it was bad, and they were just taking pictures. Like the disaster tourism was insane. FEMA was not a problem. The military was not a problem. The tourists. Yeah. We had people, okay, we were running an aid center we had like 4,000 gallons of fuel, and we about ran through all of it, like trying to get people gas to get out of town, right, if they needed to. We had people show up with out of state's license plates, like a week, not like they were there on vacation and got stuck, like a weekend, like they had just showed up, asking us to top them off because they didn't want to pay for gas before they got there. So they are wasting local resources that are trying to get aid for people to get out of town, and just like free gas. No way. I went to one area where it was completely cut off. All the roads in and out were destroyed. We had to ruck in for about 2 miles to get there. And when the flood came, it had ripped up a cemetery that was in their neighborhood. So there were bodies and tombstones all over the place. It smelled awful, right? There's just like, and the caskets are so huge, and they're like stuck in trees and stuff. You can't do anything about it. You have to just like look at it and be like, yeah, there's grandma. That sucks. And I was talking to one of the homeowners, and she was real like upset about the government not responding and stuff. And I was like, look, we know some guys who do construction and stuff like that. I would really love to see if we could put some of these bodies back in the ground for you all. And she started crying. She was like, that would mean so much. That's my family out there. And as she was crying, I look over her shoulder, and 4 side-by-sides come up because someone had just got done cutting like an ATV trail over to the nearby region, which is great if you have an ATV, but these people lost all their vehicles in this region. They had just cut an ATV trail, and these four-wheelers pull up, and they hang out the side and take pictures of the destroyed cemetery and stuff, and then drive away. And I'm just like, I can't. Oh my gosh, there was so much. So yeah, it did. It did get to the point where it's like, if you're not local and don't know what you're doing, get out. Yeah. This is frustrating.
For those who don't know, by the way, a lot of cemeteries in this part of Appalachia, and this extends up through Pennsylvania too. These are not big like church cemeteries all the time. They're not always public cemeteries. A lot of these are literally just small single or double family cemeteries that go back to the 18 or 1700s. So these are like, it is grandma. We were walking up to the house, and you had to walk on. The only path to get up that wasn't jagged rocks was just full of like tombstones that were now like under mud. And we were walking over one, and I looked down, and he was he died in World War II. Yeah. It was like a veteran saying it was like 1944, and it's like, sorry, Wilson. Yeah. It's like, it's a horrific, like how much the damage has been. And there's people like, wow, bodies, whoa, it smells bad up here. That's crazy. Like, yeah. What I told people was, if you want to help, like, obviously it didn't even occur to me to tell people like, hey, don't go do disaster tourism, because that felt like
you would think
such a no-brainer kind of thing to not do. But what I was telling people was like, if you want to go and help, call the local sheriff first, ask if they need you, if they can accommodate you, and if not, wait. Like, if you want to help, ask before you go.
If you want to go, have someone there. Yeah. Other than, because we had so many people just show up. They would show up and they would have like a 24 pack of water, which is appreciated, but we have to have 30,000 bottles of water at this point. And we can't give out enough. We have people show up with a pack of water. It's like, here, all right, where do you want me? And it's like, I don't know. Can you work a chainsaw? I can't trust you with one of mine. Like, I don't know. What do you do? Do a flip? What's your trick? Yeah, like,
yeah. That's the other things I told me. I was like, if you don't have a usable skill, don't go.
Yeah, we had a bunch of people who would just show up and they'd be like, cool, I'm here. I need food, water, and shelter for however long I'm here. And I can't do a lot. And no, I don't want to do something like shovel out a roadway. That's gross. Where do I get to be a hero and find grandma who's about to starve? It's like, we found grandma a week ago. She's fine.
Yeah.
Like that stage is done. We're just here. You want to deliver dog food to these people 5 miles up a hill? Go for it. Go walk. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get lost either, else that will be a whole nother thing.
So many of the missing 401 cases we've covered. It's like you can watch the National Park Service slowly get more and more averse to volunteers because they're like, please, for the love of God, don't help. You're just getting in the way.
He had people people who did that thing were getting lost because, okay, I think we've about set up Starlink everywhere, but for a while, if you were not standing at the house, you were not getting signal for like an hour in every direction. So we had time hacks for everything. It's like, okay, we're going to go to this location. I'm bringing these 2 guys with me. If I am not back by 3 p.m., come find me. Right. Something's gone wrong. So because like the moment you step off, like you have no way to communicate with the outside world. If we were staying out longer, we would send a runner back. We would send like an individual back to go update the time that everyone else would arrive.
And with the terrain, walkie-talkies probably don't even work well.
No, you've got like maybe a mile out of it'd be like 15 miles out doing this stuff. So there were so many people who were like, yeah, I'm going out. And then we would go look at the whiteboard and it'd be like, hey, didn't they say they were going to find old so-and-so? It's like, yeah. It's like, why doesn't it say they took anyone with them? It's like, because they didn't take anyone. And then it comes like midnight and it's like, well, I guess he died.
Yep.
He didn't write down where he was going. He just said he left and he was by himself. And then they would show up at like 1 a.m. and be like, I got stuck. How did you guys didn't come find me? It's like,
nobody knew where you were.
Don't you understand? Yeah, like you want to just guess? Like,
yeah. All right. Well, we got more questions, so let's get to these.
Sorry.
Robbie Patterson for $50. Thank you very much. Says, hello, Aiden and Mr. Goon. As a Christian Baptist, I understand that the only unforgivable sin stated in the Bible is blasphemy. As someone who has served during wartime and taken lives in wartime, what are your thoughts on killing during war?
Okay, hold on.
I'm gonna read that one myself.
Important distinction. Very important distinction. It is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. That's what Jesus says there. It's not just blasphemy, right? It's blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. Right after Jesus says the Holy Spirit calls onto all of us, right? So my interpretation, most of the Christians I talk to, the unforgivable sin is to reject God's calling to you. Reject the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So Jesus wants you to come unto him and to be saved, and you can reject that, which he calls a blasphemy, and choose to not accept Christ. That is the unforgivable sin, in the fact that Jesus wants all of us to come to him, but we can refuse it if we want. So again, not just if you've ever committed blasphemy, you can't be forgiven. I mean, if you reject God, then you never ask for forgiveness.
Which
so that's one thing.
Different than from if you reject God once, you're not out forever. It's just like you gotta accept it before the end.
Yes, because ultimately God, the Holy Spirit is calling all humanity back to God, right? So to reject it is to never return back to God.
Right.
So now as far as killing during wartime, if there was ever, like the Bible says, thou shalt not kill, killing pretty big no. Wartime is different, I believe, and I would say that I haven't really met that many people, maybe outside like Westboro Baptist people or some insane group, that would say otherwise. Like throughout the Old Testament especially, there were certainly, reasons to fight, call to fight. And in the New Testament, like not only is like the position of a soldier exonerated and mentioned highly, but one of the last things Jesus ever said to the disciples at the Last Supper is, let he who does not have a cloak, let he who does not have a sword sell his cloak and buy a sword. So there was certainly a position of fighting, certain position of war. Now, if you want to get into the morality of like certain wars and certain war times and just wars and unjust wars, that is a whole nother can of worms. But the office of a soldier, the office of a fighter, certainly has its position. No, I wouldn't call it sin.
And
Now, if you liked the killing part of it,
yeah, that might be that's a little different.
that's a little different. But yeah.
I was just gonna say, yeah. And if the Ten Commandments, it's thou shalt not murder. It's not thou shalt not kill. It is a specific thing. Murder is a specific thing because, as we can see in the Old Testament, there are a whole lot of things that are punishable by death, and somebody's got to do it. And it's specifically said, like, the person who's being killed, their blood is on them. Like, it's saying you are not responsible for killing them. This is what had to be done. Whether or not you agree with the reasoning doesn't matter. That's what the book says. It's murder is the problem. So
also, how many wars are there in the Bible
lot.
in the name of God?
So many.
Yep.
Like, wasn't it?
Sure are.
Most of the Book of Numbers.
When was David? Because I feel like when we talked about that, I remember
About 1000 BC.
Yeah, didn't God essentially specifically say you're going to have to fight your way out of this?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, I feel like that's
it's
almost cut and dry.
Yeah, Isaiah covered it.
Yeah, yeah. Next is from Fading Phase for $5. It says, I'm happy you and the Wendigooner, and not saying that, are finally back. Sorry. What Bible character do you relate to the most, and why?
Saul when he's eating those javelins, probably. Sometimes
I love me a javelin.
Yeah. It's a hard question. I kind of vibe with John. I just
I like Peter because he was very much so, like, he was very afraid. He was very cautious of everything. And he messed up a lot. He was a coward. And Jesus not only forgave him, but he restored him. He made him greater than the sum of his parts. So eventually, Peter gets to the point when the next time he's confronted by the Pharisees, he says, I have seen too great things to be silent, right? And I relate to that. I relate to messing up a lot. And for some reason, God still thinks it's funny to give me way, way more than I deserve. And to just be like, yeah, what are you going to do with it now? I don't know. People all the time will say stuff to me like, oh, it's real admirable for you to talk about God, or like, oh, I really appreciate seeing someone who has success who talks about God. But I really don't feel that way about it. It's kind of like the same thing Peter is. It's like, I have seen too great things to be silent, right? Like, if I got all this, how could I? If he did all of that for me, if he died for me, and if he saw it fit to give me the wife I have and the life I have and the money I have, and I've never even met the guy in person, but he wanted to throw all of that at me for nothing in return, then it's like, how could I not speak about him? You know, like, if you never met a guy and he made every aspect of your life perfect and never asked for anything in return, well, I mean, like, what kind of monster would it tell people? Be like, I did this myself, actually. Like, this is all me. Like, it's just, yeah, I've seen too great things to be silent. So yeah, I relate to people a lot.
Oof. I'm okay.
Can you explain why that made you laugh so much?
Just I've never even met the guy. Just, I don't know. Part of it was the laughter, and then I started coughing because I'm still sick. I've been sick for like 3 weeks, and I've done a 3-hour podcast every day this week.
Yeah, the boy's like rocking long COVID or something, and he decided that, I'm just gonna like utilize the one muscle in my body that I cannot properly utilize right now.
My diaphragm.
Yep.
All right, next.
Next, heads up, fellas, this is a little bit more on the somber note.
Okay.
But I think it's important. Joseph Johnson for $5 says, hey guys, my dad passed away earlier today, so this is just the pick-me-up I needed. If you could say a quick prayer for us, I'd appreciate it.
Of course. I'm sorry to hear that.
Very sorry to hear that, my man. Sorry to hear that.
I at least hope it was peaceful. I hope he's in a better place. I'm sure he is.
Interesting. Isaiah, this one specifically for you. Tim J 94 for $20 says, nice to have you guys back. I was curious, if your Stalker movie does well, would you consider maybe doing a Metro movie? That's probably my favorite story-based game, and I think it's a criminally underrated game series.
Soon as I have $80 million.
Yeah, that would be an expensive one to do.
Yeah, Stalker, it's like, you got a field, you got an abandoned building, cool. Metro, it's like, do you have access to a subway system? which I could. Make a lot of people really mad for a while. But
Probably you have to use green screens.
we have talked about it before. Budget would be the biggest issue,
Yeah.
but I love Metro. I would love to do a Metro games. Yeah, Metro movie.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting one. Phantom Maniacs for $5 says, "What's your guys' opinion on if you reach the highest tier in heaven, you can become a god of your own world? I was taught this when I was Mormon."
The set just before you said Mormon, I was like, oh, Mormon. I think there's absolutely nothing biblical about it.
I mean, wait, it's Mormon.
Yeah, it's just Mormonism.
I know for some reason a lot of Mormons watch me. I apologize for the mean things I say about you. Someone at one of the live shows gave me his own Book of Mormon with like his notes and stuff, and I respect that. I appreciate it. But what Aiden said.
I just really quickly. So you guys know how Genesis 50, really quick, 1 second.
This can't be good.
No, it's not. Just letting you know right now.
Even in Genesis 50.
What? Here we go. Yeah, here we go. Sorry, not Genesis 50. I'm trying to figure out what Here we go. Is it Genesis? What is it? Where is it? Where do you get? I hate paper Bibles. Like I like it, but I do not like flipping through it. The pages are so thin.
Yeah, just
okay. Here we go.
Thicker.
Yeah, Genesis 50. Here we go. Yeah. So Genesis 50 has 26 verses. In the Joseph Smith translation, there's a Genesis 50:33, which states. Here, actually, there's like a whole bunch of them. But anyway, and his name shall be called Joseph, and it shall be after the name of his father. And the whole section is referring to Joseph Smith. Like Joseph Smith wrote himself into Genesis 50, into the end of it, which is just wild to me. I'm trying to find the here. I think this is the full. Yeah. And again, so Genesis 50 ends. So Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. And then in the Joseph Smith translation, we have a little bit more. We have a 30 and a 33. 30 reads, "And again a seer will I rise up and give the fruit of thy loins. And unto him will I give power to bring forth my word unto the seed of thy loins, and not to the bringing forth of my word only, saith the Lord, but to the convincing them of my word, which shall have already gone forth among them in the last days." And then 33 is, "And that seer I will bless, then they will seek to destroy him, and those who seek to destroy him will be confounded. For this promise I give unto you, for I will remember you from my generation to generation, and his name shall be called Joseph, and it shall be after the name of his father, and he shall be like unto you, for the thing which the Lord shall bring forth by his hand shall bring my people into salvation." It's just straight up Joseph Smith adding himself to the Bible.
I want to clarify something real quick through a question. Is there any other sect of Christianity or Judaism or any of the religions of Abraham that add things to previous books of the Bible?
I mean, there have been a bunch of Gnostic sects.
Jehovah's Witness does, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Catholics.
You don't get a ton of. So here's the thing. I think the reason that we have Mormonism is that it happened in America. Because if that had happened in Europe, the Catholics would have gotten rid of it so fast it would make your head spin.
Well, it's also the time. Well, I'm not.
The time period too. But
I'm not gonna pick fights right now.
No, I do not dislike Mormons. I simply disagree with their theology.
Fair. I can read two more and then I gotta go. Lilum Gambit for $20 says, "Because of you guys, I found out I wanted to teach. A year ago, I started teaching the 4-year-olds at my church.
Aww.
Now, in a year, I'm going to Olivet Nazarene University
Wow.
to major and minor in history and theology and become a local pastor."
That's awesome, dude.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. Congratulations.
Fantastic.
And then this one's more directed at you. Vortex for $5 asks, "Do Freemasons use magic to fight demons like Jujutsu Kaisen?"
Yep. Yes, they do.
Okay.
Next question. All right.
Well, the problem with Freemasons fighting demons is that we have such a hard time figuring out what we're going to have for dinner that we just miss out on the whole exorcism. So, by the time we get there, the Catholics already handled it.
Because the goat's already dead for the sacrifice.
Hey.
You can eat that, or you can order it out. Yeah. See, he made like a bad noise, like a goat. Yeah,
that's what we do. Since we're of the goat, we go and we just meh until it goes away.
Yep.
Incredible. All right. Well, I gotta get moving because I have a girlfriend to make happy on her birthday.
That's fair.
Tell her I said happy birthday.
I will do.
Right.
Thank you.
Was there anything in there specifically that you were like, they should really get to this?
No, because we were so in depth in conversation by the time some of these were coming through. I will say that we're almost done up to 8:30.
Oh,
so
cool.
The next one would be from Pumpkin Bear, one of our mods, asking, "What is y'all's thoughts on the Angel of Death / Azrael, the Old Testament and Torah?"
Here, let me pop over.
Yep. And then, great seeing you as always. Hopefully, I'll see you again soon, and good luck, fellas.
I'll be over in a few.
You got it.
Wrap up the show. Answer a couple of these last questions. All right, now I can hear like Aiden. The question was thoughts. Where was? Wait, where'd it go? Thoughts, takes on the Angel of Death, Azrael, the Old Testament, and Torah. I don't have a ton of very specific thoughts on it. What about you?
I don't know. Maybe the death angel is an angel that commits the act of death, or maybe it was just at that time the vessel of death, in Egypt. I try not to take one-time verses or one-time mentions and make them into entire points of theology, because some people take the death angel and they're like, oh, this one angel is the one that takes everyone's soul to heaven when they die. It's like, I don't really know about that. Maybe it was just this one time it was an angel that committed death. So I don't know, but I could go either way.
I'll look it up really quick because I'm not super familiar with.
You just got to be careful about basing entire religious principles off of like a single mention. That's where you get snake handlers from.
Yeah, he's not in the Bible. I don't think. I think it's a extra biblical text. Maybe it's in Judaism, in the Hebrew Bible. Yeah, I'm not familiar with Azrael. Personally, I'm sorry. I wish I had a better answer to that. Just gonna really quickly. Jack Manson for 10 asked, "What do you think about people calling Mr. Beast the Antichrist?"
It's funny.
I think Jimmy's probably not the Antichrist.
He's probably not the Antichrist.
Like, 9 out of 10 people I'd put there first.
I'll bet on it for sure. Yeah.
Also, the Antichrist is supposed to like try and convince people that he's,
if tomorrow Jimmy, made a video and he was like, guys, I have the solution for death, corruption, sin. You just have to believe me. I'd be like, all right, maybe.
Exactly. I'd be like, you know what? Maybe there's something. Yeah. Let's see. One person asked thoughts on Matthew 18:6, which I'm gonna have to pull it up to recall.
I can pull that up. I've got a tab with Matthew open. 18:6. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones. Oh, this is a verse about tying a millstone to their neck. I think based. No, I think it just goes to show like the severity of how evil it is to harm a child, because children are not only God's children like all of us are, but they're also, expressly innocent compared to other people. So to harm one of them, Jesus isn't saying that you should, as cool as it would be, Jesus isn't saying that you should tie giant rocks to their neck and throw them in the ocean. He's saying that alternatively, it would be better. For that to happen to someone than for that person to harm a child.
Yeah.
Because that's how seriously like Jesus takes the protection of children. During this part, it's like, the Pharisees have rejected him, and now the children are coming to him and they're sitting on his lap and they're hearing his stories.
Mm-hmm.
And he opens by telling the disciples, he says, verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as the little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Because whosoever shall humble himself as this child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Saying basically like the child is, accepting, it's loving, it doesn't know sin, it doesn't know temptation. That is how we are to be. So Jesus looks fondly on children. If your options are to tie a stone to your neck and jump in the ocean or harm one, then get to the nearest ocean.
Yeah. It's I love the way that Jesus puts things. The man had a way with words.
He did have a way with words. It's almost like he was God or something.
Crazy. This is an interesting one. Peyton Drews said, love the stash. Somebody else, Bubbinator, asked if you could confirm or deny if you're using a filter to enhance your looks. He's just that pretty. But somebody said, I mean, are you using a filter?
If I was using the filter, the jaw would be far, far larger. Be like
you'd have that Zac Efron jaw.
Be like mogging.
Yeah.
Everyone. Yeah.
But Peyton Drews said, love the stash. You guys see Satan as pathetic.
Yes.
I think, I think pathetic's a good word for it. I also might be peeking myself because I talk louder than Aiden does. I'm having to do the soundboard. I hate this. If I were to fight a demon with a firearm, would I need to get the ammo consecrated? I don't think fighting a demon with a firearm is on the table.
No, but let's hear him out.
Fair, yeah.
if I were to, this wouldn't be where I call something good enough.
That's fair.
There was a demon somewhere and I was bringing a gun. I wouldn't be like, yeah, it's probably fine. Yeah. That would be the double down time. Yeah.
Take it somewhere, have somebody, etch some symbols into the...
Yeah, put a cross on it or something.
Yeah.
Make it better, yeah.
The holy handgun.
The holy handgun, yep.
Let's see. Here we go. What's your thoughts on the evil throughout history, such as 213, 1307 with the end of the Knights Templar, or the Spanish Inquisition, or even the World Wars and Cold War and proxy wars? Do you think demons had anything to do with it? I think that, first of all, there needs to be... I'd see where the question is coming from. First of all, I think that...
That sounded like every email I've ever gotten.
It needs to be understood that a lot of humanity's problems have nothing to do with demons or God or any of that, and simply the fact that we are generally really dumb and selfish and greedy, and that doesn't necessitate a demon. At the same time, when I look at something like what happened to the Templars, I can't imagine that there wasn't a demon on the Pope's shoulder going, hey, these guys who just fought a whole bunch of wars for you, who gave up all their property and their livelihoods and forsook family and spent all that time fighting wars in a desert, kill them. Like,
I think it goes both ways. I think that the devil is the author of confusion, and or Satan's the author of confusion. We have demons in the world that do wicked things, but it also doesn't take it. I don't think it takes that much for us to fall into our temptations. Mm-hmm. I think if you lay them out in front of us, we'll trip over them most of the time.
Yeah, I agree. This one's interesting. Brian Phipps for 50. Thank you very much. That's very generous of you. Said, my wife is convinced that demons manifest themselves as ghosts, and she says that all hauntings, including benevolent, are demonic. It's relevant to Aiden's and Dr. Goon. So my question is the unsub house haunted? Oh my God. I didn't think that we were getting... I did not read the whole question first and did not expect it to go there.
So for one, I kind of do think if hauntings are real, then they're expressly either spirits or demons, something not good. No idea why an angel would be there. I have a few ideas why spirits would be there. Which to me makes Ghost way more scary because it's not a human soul. It's something that wants us to think it's a human soul for some reason. Is the unsub house haunted? I feel like when I was there, I remember like hearing someone upstairs and being like, "Oh, is anyone home?" And they're like, "No." But I feel like I also that could have been a story I heard and misremembering or something like that. But
maybe.
I mean, sure, why not? Sure, it's haunted. That's fun.
Yeah, I wish that they, I would love to go check. That's all I have to say about that. I did not notice any ghosts. It wasn't particularly.
I've heard a few people say that it's haunted. I've heard that mentioned a couple times around the campfire, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a fun set they have there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice house. John Starnieri asked if you would ever consider doing content about Bloodborne, which is not I don't know. Are there Christian themes in Bloodborne, or is that just a general question?
Yeah, I think it's like aesthetically like
Got
Gothic, early
Yeah.
Catholicism. I don't know anything about Bloodborne, but if I learn something about Bloodborne, I might.
Yeah. See, somebody said Wendigoon an inspiring philosophy crossover. When I'm trying actively to get Mike to come on this show, and Isaiah, if you'd want to be on for that too, I would love to have you. And then also, obviously, you guys are free. Oh, where'd he go? Oh, he's back. I was like, do you hate Mike that much? God.
I went to click the new tab, which is right next to that, so I started laughing. I'm like, well,
Oh, now he's frozen. Good God.
you not see me?
I see you now, but you froze for
Okay,
a second.
alright.
It's just the face you were making when you froze. You're like,
It's falling apart. It's over.
but yeah, I would love to see you guys do something. I mean, obviously you don't have to do it with me, but I'm happy to try and facilitate that if you want. Mike's awesome, super smart guy, really, really well versed. But this is probably the last one that we're gonna get to because it's now past 10. But it's kind of a theme I'm seeing. But Norberto Rodriguez Jr. put it this way: why did Lucifer rebel against God, and what was the point? It makes no sense to me, and Paradise Lost isn't the answer, or could it be? And does God leave clues in the physical world for us to find? Somebody else asked.
Just say that one more time.
Sure, yeah. Basically, why did Lucifer rebel against God? Because that's basically the question: is why did Lucifer rebel, and does God leave clues in the physical world for us to find? I guess about why we're here, and why things have happened. I mean, I think I think it's pretty simple. It's angels are beings with free will, just like humans, and they're gonna have I think there's this weird sense, at least in my opinion, that angels are these perfect servants that have no free will. They have to do whatever they're told, and that Lucifer, in that case, would then have to be something special. He'd have to be higher than the angels. So it seems to me that angels must have some degree of emotion and free will. I mean, they definitely have free will if we look at the Bible. But what do you think, Isaiah?
I think their beings capable of free will, and his free will led him to pride, right?
Mhm.
So he wanted pride. He wanted to be greater than God, the Bible says, right? So he attempted to, and was cast out. He wanted to usurp him effectively. So now his entire goal is to do the same thing, but one person at a time, right? So I think it's just, a being of free will that's given power and majesty will eventually find himself erring on the side of control, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what it was.
I've seen jealousy of humans. Basically, the idea that God created humans and we were his, like, Satan used to be the golden boy, and then when we were created, he was like, well, why are they your family? I'm your family. We're your sons. And so that's how I see it. I think it's very simple. It's something like pride. I agree. And let me see if I can anything back. Brian Phipps, are you trying to get us murdered? I'll tell you what he said afterwards. But yeah, there's. I'm trying to see if there's anything else here that's really big to answer. But no, I think we've gotten through most of the questions. A lot of these are repetitions or a lot of thank yous, which is very nice. I am always just astonished at how many people in here have returned to the faith or at least taken an interest in it. I'm always very, very proud to see people who don't agree, who aren't Christian, in here because they're interested in learning and they want to know what it is we believe. And rather than making the assumption that Christians are stupid or backwards, or that our beliefs come from a place of like wanting control or something like that, I appreciate when people come and spend the time to sit down and understand what it is that we believe. Especially because, I'm sure people have noticed Isaiah and I don't agree on everything, and I'm sure we both disagree with Catholics on a ton of things, and Orthodox, and probably all sorts of other Protestant denominations. But the way that you find common ground, the way that you make everybody, work together, and the way that you get to where you need to go spiritually is to have conversations and to understand and to view one another with open minds and open hearts. But that is I think the last of it. So Isaiah, any final thoughts?
Yep.
You don't have to.
Demons are wicked, and they are certainly more powerful of us and should be feared, but not as powerful as God, right? He who is within me is greater than he who is within the world. So seek comfort in that, not in your own power, but in God's power. Stay safe, and prayers for Appalachia.
Yeah. And regardless of what demons are in substance, the key message in here is that if you are strong in your faith, you have nothing to worry about. They cannot get you. All they can do is tempt you away. Be strong and keep your faith, and you will make it through.
If you're not a slave to your own impulses, if you don't just like chase after whatever, dinner is laid in front of you, then you've won, right? Because that's all they can do. They could just like tempt you with things. And as long as you are immune to things, as long as you don't give in to every impulse you have, well, there's not a lot they can do to you. Mm-hmm. Assuming you know Christ. And if you don't know Christ, well, that's step one. You know that at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, oh God, I am so ready to not be sick anymore. Well, thank you. Oh my God, kill me. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight, for watching, for hanging out. For those of you who contributed, thank you so much. It means a lot to us. It helps us continue doing shows like this and growing. We're trying to upgrade our studio, do a little bit more traveling, and hopefully get a little bit more on schedule with everything, not just this show. But yeah, I don't know that either of us are totally sure when we'll be here next, but I promise you we will be. And, if you want to let us know what topics you'd be interested in, that is a great thing to do in the comment section. So thank you, everybody, and y'all have a good night.
Thank you all so much for watching, and stay safe.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Yeah. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Bye.